Okay, so now no one's here yet, but I just wanted to get this done if I could, and then hopefully I'll be able to post the recordings this afternoon so that everybody can have them. And we are at the very end of Beowulf. This is the last battle. It really is the last battle because this is not only, I mean, you guys have already read it, so hopefully you have already read it. But the battle, this is the battle between Beowulf and the dragon. So he's already, remember the last two battles. There are three big battles in the epic poem. The first one is against Grendel, where he rips Grendel's arm off. The second one is against Grendel's mom, Grendel's dam, as they put it, and she came back for revenge because her son was killed, and he ends up swimming down into a lake at the very, very bottom, and then she pulls him into her cave, and he eventually beheads her and then finds Grendel's body where, he's dead, and he cuts off his head as well. And brings his head back to Hrothgar. Then he comes home and he becomes king back in Gateland, the land of the gates, and he is the Lord of the gates, and he actually, his king, he brought him back all this treasure from Hrothgar, because of his deeds, and then his king rewarded him and praised him and everything. And then when the king died, even though he's the son of Ecgtheow and his king was named Hugelac, when Hugelac dies, he's the strongest member of the clan, so he becomes king. Hugelac wants him to be king. Everybody else wants him to be king. He's super popular, whatever. And he reigns for 50 years, okay? And this is really important because he was probably in his 20s when he went and killed Grendel and Grendel's mom. But now he's 70s. So he's an old dude. And it's funny because, we think about age so differently, but back then, few people lived very long. Like the median age in around 1300 CE was probably 48, 45. That's upper class people. Younger people who were poorer didn't have much of a life expectancy at all. So for someone to reach 70 something is really pretty extraordinary. And this is where he is. But now he's, because of the dragon, because of the worm, which most of the time when you're going to see it, it's going to look like this. But and I'll just put it in chat. It's spelled in Old English, it's spelled worm, probably for the Great Vowel Shift, but it's still pronounced worm. So, but this dragon wakes up because somebody, essentially a guy went into his hoard, found the underground, like at the entrance to the underground cave where this dragon was sleeping on his treasure, and woke him up by stealing a cup. Okay. And it's funny because if you watch Lord of the Rings, well, especially The Hobbit, there's a dragon, and the dragon doesn't like, he notices immediately if some of his hoard is being taken, and that's what wakes him up and makes him angry. Well, the truth is, though, I mean, if you're watching the Harry Potter stuff, one of the final things that happen in the Harry Potter series is that they go to the wizard bank, and one of they're essentially trying to find a Horcrux. Well, it's hidden inside somebody's vault, and outside the vault is being guarded by a dragon. And so they're still using dragons to guard treasure. And so but they're using that's a very common trope, that the dragon is only angry because somebody's trying to steal its gold stuff. It's all its little trinkets and rubies and pearls, and if you find a dragon, then you're going to find all this stuff. And that's, of course, it's all mythic, but who cares, so, but this is a far bigger monster than Grendel, far bigger monster than Grendel's mom. And it's also, it can breathe fire, and it does all sorts of horrible stuff. And so this is this is hard. But what happens essentially, that, the dragon gets angry, and he starts burning down villages and stuff. And so Beowulf has no choice and he's angry about the damage that's done to his people and his people's, livelihood. He's angry about, the killing and stuff like that. And he has no, he has to do something about the dragon, or the dragon's going to destroy the whole countryside. And the dragon knows that a human stole his stuff, and so he essentially he knows why the dragon's angry at people. The dragon knows that a person stole the cup. In fact, he actually, for to his hand from the thief came the precious cup. So Beowulf knows the thief took a cup, and he even has the cup. And this is so essentially Beowulf is one of 12 people on this expedition to go and attack the worm, the dragon. And the 13th person is the thief, the one who caused the whole problem. Okay. And they forced him, they took him captive, and they forced him to show them how to get to the dragon. And he didn't want to go against his will. And essentially inside, he told them, this is what's inside. There's all these gems and gold work. Now this is funny because he stole the cup. Bad guy, so he's in trouble. And yet part of Beowulf's motive in coming and killing the worm is not just to kill the dragon, but to get his treasure. Because again, with that, you accomplish great deeds, and with that accomplishment comes treasure. That's the gift. Those gifts, those rewards are half of the reason you do something, and that's okay. In this culture, that is absolutely fine. Okay, so his description of what's inside is an enticement for Beowulf as well. But remember, Beowulf's in his 70s. Okay, and so we know, and this dragon is super dangerous. And he's not going to be able to go in and say, hey, here's your cup back, please stop bothering us. Dragon wouldn't understand that. He'd just see, oh, there's my cup, and those humans stole it, we're going to kill them all. So there's no bargaining with the dragon. Okay, so instead, this king, Beowulf, gold friend to the gates, sat down on the cliff top and wished his companions good luck. His heart was sad. The fate loomed all too near. An old king, restless yet ready, about to depart life from limb, must meet to go seeking his soul's reward. In other words, he thinks, I am not long in this world. I am going to die soon. And in fact, it could be that I'm going to die very soon when I face the dragon. And so he sits down with his 12 companions and says, look, I've fought a lot of wars, and I've survived so far. I remember every single one of them. So he's got his wits about him. I was 7 winters old when this guy, essentially Rethel, took me from my father to having to hold. And this is another aspect of feudal life, is that it's very rare for a person to raise his own children. Well, at least his own son. The sons are often, it's kind of fostered out to other noblemen, and then they're raised to fight and do all this. But it's like, your rearing is going to be tougher if you're raised by someone else. That was very common, even far later than that, for a man for a child to be shifted, probably like he was 7. It's 7, 8, 9, somewhere around there. It's or when they look like they're big enough to really start training, they get shifted to somewhere else, and they're raised by someone else, at least until they're at least a squire or something. They're 14, 15, 16, something like that, and then they can return home. So he says, I was taken from my father, and raised him myself. He raised me. Rethel did, even though that's not my dad. But he was a kinsman, and he says I was no less in standing than his own son. So he treated me like a son. And Hugelac was one of his. So essentially, he was treated like Hughelac's brother, even though he was far younger than Hugelac. Remember, Hughelac's already dead. He died. He was king before. And so, and he talks about how he was raised, and how people died. The different Hassan, one of the brothers, died. he accidentally shot his own kinsman, his own brother, and that was horrible. And again, there's this brother killing. So it brings up this kind of the idea of, Cain and Abel again. It's a very common theme in this particular thing. So, and he says it's, what's sad is seeing an old man, where some old man sees his young son swing on the gallows, or sees his own son die. That's really sad. And the thing is too, because he had killed his brother, then he was put to death. And so it's all bad stuff. But that grieving is really sad. So what he says, essentially, he says, he talks about this lamenting, and and he's talking about death to all of his people, these warriors that have come with him. Okay. And there's, what happens when you lose your life, and what happens to the people who are left behind. And then the war that happened between the Swedes and the Gates, and all of this. I mean, it's really infighting because they're all kind of related to each other. And so and that's bad too. Again, that's very reminiscent of the Cain and Abel story too. You don't kill your own kinsman, and yet that's kind of what happened. So finally, though, Hylak is the one that kind of calms everything down. Okay. And so, and they even talk about the price for paying, that essentially, is there something that they could have paid as a sort of life price? Remember we talked about Weird Guild in the last selection. And so he says, no matter what happened, whether they were fighting with the Swedes, or this was going on, or that was going on, or whatever, he says, I was always in the battle. And so first in the ranks, he says, I would always demand to march before him. So shall I always seek to in battle. So in other words, I'm always going to be the first one to go. So I don't stand in the back. Usually the big leaders, and often the kings, stand in the back and let their warriors do all the stuff. And so, and he's like, no, this is not the way I go. And I'm first one, the first line of defense, and I just go. And I kill as much as I can. I'm a really great warrior, have been. Of course, he's in his 70s now. So now he says, though, I risked many a conflict when I was young. Now old, I yet wish to seek vengeance, earn renown of that evildoer that leaves his vault to seek me. So in other words, even though I'm an old person now, and this should be long in my past, I want to fight the dragon. That's what he says. I want to. That's my request. And so he even kind of like salutes them all, and he says, okay, I would go swordless, I'd go unarmed and grapple with my hands, but there's no way. If I knew how else to grapple with for glory as I did with Grendel's, like I would fight him barehanded, the dragon, I would fight barehanded if I felt like there was any way to defeat him that way. But he breathes fire. Here is the heat of the furious flame, and he's venomous. So I'm going to go in armed. I'm going to have a mail shirt and a shield, and I'm going to go and attack him. And he says, again, he's talking about fate. Now I don't know if I'm going to die, or if I'm going to and lose, or if I'm going to win and triumph and come back and be your king, but it's going to be determined as the maker wishes. So as God says, it will happen, it will happen. But again, that assignment of fate, like I might not make it through this battle, and I might not win, but I'm going to do, fight my hardest, and then we'll see what God decides, or fate. And it's really a mixture, because fate is not God. And yet, because this is a mixed text, remember this was originally pagan, and then it was transcribed down by priests, it's going to be, it has, that's why we have the stories of Cain and Abel and things like that. So it's going to be, it's a kind of a mixture. It's both fate and God in charge. And that's a little interesting, at least to me. So But he goes, I'm not going to, talk anymore. Let's go. But he tells the warriors, bide here on the barrow and see which of us better endures his wounds in the warfare. Which of the two? That's me and the dragon. He's telling them, don't fight with me. Like, don't come in. Just stay outside and be safe, and then see who wins. This is not your fight, is what he says. Now, this is not, when you talk about feudalism, this is not what he's supposed to be doing. As a king, he's the king. He's supposed to be the one who sends his warriors in, and the warriors fight for him, and then they bring him back treasure. Just like, remember, when he was young, his king Hygelac sent him to Hrothgar to defeat Grendel, and then he brought back the treasure. Hygelac didn't go himself, and Hrothgar did not fight. He was the king. And yet Beowulf says specifically, don't fight. I'm going to go in alone. Literally, he says that. And he says, he says this, my power alone is going to fight the, why? Why is it, what is he doing? What is he thinking? Now, he is thinking that he could die soon anyway, he's not going to be long for this world, so why not, just go out in a blaze of glory. And yet, wouldn't it be more effective? Wouldn't he be more likely to win if he had all his warriors with him? But now the warriors don't argue with him. Okay? They don't go in. So he says, shall gain the glory by my bravery, or the battle will carry off your lord, some deadly wound dealt by this terror. And he gets up and walks away, and he goes into the tunnel, and he goes down into the barrow, and they don't go with him. And so, yes, he's brave, but he's leaving his men. He's given him a direct order not to come in and fight, but they don't argue with him because they don't want to go and fight because they're chicken. He is brave. They are not. So he goes in, and it says it's no coward's way, but they're not going in with him. And so all of his men he brought are going to sit outside the barrow and wait till the fight's over. And so right then at that point, it says, he had lived through tons of different conflicts, had fought giants and monsters and everything else, but he fought a dragon like this. And it's one of those impossible things to do because the dragon can heat up everything. So no way to near, so he wasn't even near the horde. There's no way to get to the horde unburned because the dragon was going to set fire to him. Because the dragon, and the dragon has this, and his chainmail's not going to help him because it's just going to heat up and burn him too. And so, and that's really a problem. But so he cries out from his heart in his frustration. He roars, his voice rang high and battle clear under the Horstone, and the dragon hears him. So first the creature's flame breathed from beneath the stone, hot battle fumes, and the earth rumbled. And so Beowulf swings his shield at the grim guest. And then, so they start actually fighting each other. And he draws his sword, but its edges are flawed because it's an old sword. Remember, he's used it in battle for years and years and years and years. And so, but they're both brave. They're both going to do this, here he is, this kind of, it's really very epic. Strong in spirit, the friend of his people with tall shield, while the serpent coiled, moving swiftly. So he's ready for battle. Okay. So, and the dragon writhing and looping, the description is pretty graphic, and it's just a little scary, but you get the epic suspense. Like you can see the dragon is coming, and the leader's just sitting there waiting. Beowulf's gonna, and it says, even here, it says that for the first time, his shield is going to deny him. It's not going to give him what he hopes for. So we already are getting little inklings, little suggestions here and there. Beowulf is not going to survive this. Okay, so the Gates Lord raised his hand and struck the ghastly skin, but the sword really didn't bite into him. So it bit weakly on bone, biting less fiercely than the king of the nation had need of in his distress. So it was a rather ineffectual blow. But remember, this dragon has these scales that protect him. But that it still makes him angry that Beowulf struck a sword at him. So the dragon's still irritated, and he starts blasting flame all over everywhere. And it says the gold friend of the gates claimed not the victory. His war blade, that fine steel, naked in conflict, failed. So his sword is not going to work. And it says for the famed, so we know this fate is bad. This is not going to go well. It was no easy thing to give up this world, and he doesn't want to die now. But every man must die, as every man must let go his lease on life. But they keep fighting. The Horde Ward, that's the worm, took heart. So he's like, wait, I think I'm going to win this. Breath swelled into breast once more. He who once ruled, suffering intensely, was furled in flame. So he is being burned by this. No band of handpicked men gathered around him. Remember, he told them, don't come, this is not your fight. And yet nobody's coming to help him. And in fact, they don't even wait outside the barrow. They run into the forest and hide. To save their lives, they slunk to the forest. Yet sorrow welled in the heart of one there. So one of the 12 men that were left behind, and this is not the thief, it's one of the warriors, and his name was Beowulf. So Beowulf, son of Weohstan, was one of his warriors that was brought, and he is freaking out. So everybody else is all scared. Oh no, let's run into the woods so the dragon won't see us. You know, he says, seeing his lord scorched by heat under his war mask, he recalled honor done to him before. The fine holdings of the Waymundings, each his by right his father had owned. He could not hold back. His hand seized the lime wood shield. So he can't wait and watch. He's not going to do what Beowulf said, because he can't let him fight it alone. So he pulls out his sword, and we find a little bit about how Weohstan used it. You know, his dad used it and stuff. But he's got all, you know, and he has a helmet, he has ring mail, he has, you know, and so he's got all of this history to him. And it's funny because here's Beowulf, you know, not doing well in battle, and yet they stop to tell us all about all of the weaponry that Beowulf is using from his ancestors. And it even says, you know, Weohstan held them for many a season, blade and ring mail, till it was his son's time to do noble deeds. And that this is Beowulf now. So, and he gave him all of this, you know, and said, go serve the gates. And so he had never, this is the first time that he's ever fought. So it's a very, I mean, so we assume Beowulf is probably the youngest of the warriors, and yet Beowulf is by far the oldest person in this thing, and yet Beowulf went in by himself in his 70s to fight the dragon. Well, Beowulf can't wait. He can't, maybe it's because he's young, but he knows, and it's also because of his family history. You know, his parents, his dad was brave, so he's going to be brave. But then for the first time came onset of war. So this is the first time this young champion has ever fought. But there, with his lord, with Beowulf, he came to meet the challenge. His courage stood firm, nor did the blade fail in this fight. So Beowulf is going to be successful. And so he joins Beowulf, and they're going to fight together. But first, before he joins him, he speaks to the soldiers, the other warriors, and he goes, I remember when we drank mead and we made a promise of fealty, you know, that we promised Beowulf that we would repay him He gave us all these weapons and all this treasure, and we promised if ever the time of need came upon him, we would repay his gifts with sword and helm. He picked us to go with him because he thought we were going to fight well. And yet, now he says, though our leader wished to perform this act alone for us, being the warrior, because he's that kind of a warrior, but our leader has need of the strength of fine fighting men. So he may have intended to go and fight this thing by himself because he's super brave, but he needs us, and we need to go and fight with him. Now the day comes when our leader has need of the strength of fine fighting men. Let us go to the aid of our battle king through the hot flame and the fire dread. And he says, I'd rather my body was shrouded in fire. And if we're not willing to fight, we might as well bear our shields back home if we're not willing to do the things we're supposed to do. And most of you think, oh, well, he can do it. But he alone does not deserve to suffer pain or fall in combat. So I'm going to go fight with him. And so finally he does that. He goes. So he tells them, look, you guys, he gave you all the stuff. You need to fight for him. Nobody moves a muscle except Beowulf. Beowulf is just looking like, come on. And they won't come. And so he leaves. He runs through the fire, through the battle fumes and everything, and gets to Beowulf and he says, go on, carry this through. You just like you said you would, okay? Defend yourself bravely, and I am going to stand by you. And here comes the dragon again, and for a second time to attack with a flood of fire, and a wave of flames charred his shield to the embossing. Chainmail scarce protected the young spearman, and this is Beowulf. So he's facing the heat now. Yet he charged bravely behind the shield of his kinsman after his own was burnt. Then the war king gathered his strength and struck a mighty blow with his blade, drove it with all his power to lodge there in the serpent's skull. And so that's Beowulf. Beowulf's sword, nailing. It's actually, again, this is a Germanic language, so it's gonna, a lot of, I'm trying to think of like Ermengarde, a lot of the terms that are used in Norse mythology and in even the name of Thor's hammer, and all these different, those are all going to sound a lot like these names for swords and even the names of the people themselves. So we should see a lot of things even in today's world that are drawn from these kinds of stories. So, but anyway, but Beowulf's, he struck a big blow, but Beowulf's sword, Nagling, ancient and steel gray, shattered. Its edge had failed. And it was actually, why did it shatter? Because his blow, the blow that his arm was so strong that he struck it too hard against the dragon, and it made it pop to pieces. So because he was so strong was his arm, or so I have heard. His blow destroyed the sword itself. Okay. And then of course it starts to attack for a third time as the hero gave ground, and it gripped Beowulf's neck in its sharp fangs. So Beowulf strikes it, his sword shatters, and then the dragon bites him in the neck. And his fangs are poisonous. So it's kind of like, again, this is taken from, if you go to I think it's is it the second Harry Potter, where he fights the dragon. It's not really a dragon, but its fangs are poisonous, and so Harry gets bitten by the fang and he's going to die. So it's the same thing. So here's Beowulf, and he's been bitten in the neck by the dragon. So just imagine what that looks like. So, and Beowulf is just, oh my gosh, oh no, he's been bitten on the neck. He avoids the fangs, Beowulf does, though his hand was burned, and using his strength well, the warrior struck lower so that his rich sword inlaid with gold sank into the dragon and the flames grew weaker. Okay, so Beowulf actually, his sword finds a home. It actually stabs into the dragon. Then Beowulf draws, he's being bitten in the neck right now. The dragon has him by the neck, and but he takes out a dagger, just a knife, and that he wears, and the helm of the Wederus cut the worm deeply. So then he's able to stab him with the knife. So each of them was as a man should be. And this is the point of this particular fight. They are fighting the way they should. They're being the warriors they should be. They are the ideal warriors, because even though it could kill them, they go in with absolute bravery and they don't stop fighting until they don't breathe anymore. Like literally, they fight until their last breath. And meanwhile, of course, where are the other warriors? They're outside in the woods hiding. They're not being the warriors they're supposed to be. So they are the epitome of what you're not supposed to do. Okay. They're shameful. They're embarrassing. But this was the king's last glorious deed, because he's going to die. The wound the earth drake had dealt him now sweltered and swelled. So it's poison, remember. Beowulf soon knew that baleful venom, that poison within, welled in his breast. So he knows, I'm going to die of being poisoned, essentially. It wasn't just the bite in the neck, it's that the neck, that the talon, the teeth were poisonous. And so he knows what's going to happen. So full of sober thoughts, that nobleman sat himself down in a place by the wall. So the worm's dead. He saw the giant's work, the barrow mound, held fast by stone arches on pillars inside. And then Beowulf, the best of thanes, because remember, a thane is like a vassal. A thane is serving his king. Well, Beowulf is the best of thanes because he's the one who actually came in and fought. But he washed the wound on Beowulf's neck with his own hands, cleansed the blood from his lord and friend, his great leader, and unloosened his helmet. And then Beowulf speaks. Now he can't speak really well because he's been, bitten in the neck. But he knows that he's done for. And so he says, now I would wish to have given my son my war gear, but he never had a kid. Had I been granted an heir to live after me, but he doesn't have an heir. I ruled the people for 50 winters. No neighboring king dare face me while I ruled. I sought no quarrels, swore no oaths for unjust causes. And he says, now I'm going to die, but I can rejoice in everything that I've accomplished. I kept up the gates at peace for 50 years. I never killed my own kin. I never did shameful deeds for the wrong reasons. Everything I've done was honorable and brave and courageous, and what a king should do. But then he goes, now go swiftly, dear Beowulf. Now the worm lies there, dormant, sorely wounded, deprived of its treasure. Be in haste, so that I can see the gold hoard. I want to see the riches that I've won. Because he can't walk anymore. So he sits down and he's like, I need to see the treasure before I die. That shows how important that treasure is to him. So Beowulf is, of course, devastated by all of this, but he runs under the barrow's roof. He actually goes into the treasure, and he saw a heap of gems in the worm's den, and gold glittering all over the ground, stands of goblets, but tons and tons. I mean, it just describes all this treasure. And that's, of course, for us too. Of course, at that time, just like Beowulf would have found all of this treasure really important, so would the people listening. They would have been like, oh, wow, look at all that stuff he got. And remember, he won it by defeating the dragon. So he brings a bunch of it. And he says there's no sign of the worm. The blade had finished him. Then the warrior alone, as I've heard, plundered the hoard, filled his arms with the flagons and plate, and took the standard that was in there too. The bright banner for the old king's blade had already ended. So essentially, he takes all this stuff out, including a banner, and Wiglaf in haste now, keen to return, spurred on by riches, anxiety weighing on the brave warrior. And he was hoping that he'd still find, he'd spent too much time in there. He get all the stuff. He was afraid Beowulf would be dead, but he's not. Okay. So bearing the treasure to his great chieftain, he found his lord bleeding, his life ending. And he tries to clean the wounds. And he cleans it, essentially makes it so that Beowulf can speak. And so he sees his gold and he prays to God, thanks. I give word of thanks for all the treasures that I see before me, that I was able to gain such wealth for the folk before death could take me. And he says, I have paid with my life for this hoard. But the treasure will still really help the gates. And then he turns to Wiglaf and he says, tell those men famous in war to build me a bright mound on a cape by the sea's edge after the fire. So first that he gets burned. That's pretty standard. They have a buyer and they'll burn his body, but then build me a mound, a burial mound. And essentially that mound is to remind people that I was here. And call it Beowulf's Barrow as they steer their ships through the ocean mist, because it's going to be on the cliff so people can see it as they pass by on boats. And then he takes the golden torque from his neck, so the kind of necklace, and gave it to the Thane. So gives it to Wiglaf, telling the young spearman to use it well, and the shirt of mail. And so he gives him all of his armor. You are the last of us, the last of all our race, the Waymundings. Fate has swept away all my kin, sent the earls in their strength to their destined end. I must follow them. So Wiglaf, you're the last of our kind. It's like the last Jedi or something. So, and it really is. It's so much like I know I've made all these connections to other epic sort of things, but it really is like this. This is something that's very appealing to a large part of the population, or people wouldn't be big Star Wars fans, So, and so he gives all of this. That was his final word, and he dies. And it says, though his soul yet went seeking the true steadfast power. So his soul goes on to heaven. And then Wiglaf's really devastated. And so the dragon's dead, yes, but it's, so's Beowulf. And he was really killed. I mean, the iron blade finished him. So it was really Wiglaf that killed him. But Beowulf definitely had a hand in it. Remember, Beowulf had been fighting him all over anyway. And then he also stabs him with his knife. So Beowulf really, and Wiglaf's not going to go, well, I'm the one who actually killed him. Wiglaf's just devastated that Beowulf's gone. But at least he killed the dragon too. So even though Beowulf died, he didn't fail. And that's really important. So he was willing to, he was willing to die trying, even if he failed, but he didn't. They killed the dragon. And so, Beowulf's share of the treasure was bought with his death. And so, as soon as the cowards, they even call them cowards, as soon as the warriors figure out that Beowulf's dead, but the dragon is too, the other guys climb out of the woods and go, oh wow, I guess we're safe. And they even calls them oath breakers because they didn't fight for their king when they were supposed to. So these are bad dudes. They really didn't do what they were supposed to do. 10 men who had failed to make use of their spears in the hour of their lord's greatest need. Now ashamed, here they come in, they're armed. And they come to where Beowulf lies dead. And Wiglaf is just sitting there, weary, the warrior there at his master's shoulder, trying to rouse him with water, to no avail, because Beowulf's gone. There was no way on earth he could save his leader's life, though that was his wish. And this is all, of course, ordained by God. And every man just has to obey that and die when he's supposed to. But then all these other people are going to get a ready rebuke from the young thing. So here's this young warrior, probably had never seen battle before, goes in with Beowulf and defeats the dragon, and he's mad. He is super mad. He goes, if somebody's speaking truth, they're going to have to say that, your Lord who gave you treasure and you swore you would help, that you left him behind. He gave you all of these gifts, but they'd have to say that essentially the king threw those weapons away by giving them to you because you didn't use them when you needed to. When fighting befell the king, his comrades were nothing to boast of. Yet God, who gives victory, allowed his own blade to avenge him. So in other words, Beowulf still won. And that's what he said. So he's not saying, and I won. He even says, I could do little to protect my kinsmen, yet I found a measure of strength for the fight. As I struck with my sword at the deadly creature, it grew weaker. But he doesn't say, and I killed it. Instead, he says the king killed, Beowulf killed him, killed the dragon. But not enough people came. Too few rallied around our king in his distress. Now the delights of receiving treasure, all the gifts of fine blades are ended for you and your kin. You guys are not going to get any treasure. And every man of your clan must lose his land rights. And you be dead to all glory. Death is better for every man than a life full of shame. So they're going to be punished for this. And this is part of feudalism. If you are not loyal to your lord and you don't do what you're supposed to do to help him, you can be stripped of all of the gifts that you once got. So, and much of those gifts came in land, because land was probably the easiest way to acquire wealth, because you could just have people work the land, and then it was a very agricultural society. And so, or you'd have animals on the land. But if you don't have land, you can't do any of that. So he says, all your stuff's going to be taken back. And he says, okay, let's go and report what happened. And everybody knows Beowulf is dead. And they essentially, he's now the wish granter of the Waderas, the lord of the gates, lies on his deathbed, brought to his rest by the dragon's deed. Slashed with knife wounds. Beowulf could not wound that dreadful creature in any way with his sword. And then they announced Wiglaf went and helped. And now he's guarding the body. But then it says, now expect war. When the fall of the king is widely, freely known to the Franks and Frisians, a hard battle. So remember, he said, just by his own reputation, nobody went to war with him because they were afraid of him. But now he's dead. And this is not going to be a lovely time from this point on, because Beowulf can no longer protect the gates. Okay. And so this is a sad moment. I mean, this is a sad ending in the first place. It's a sad ending. But that's the way the world goes. I mean, everybody, no one can escape death. And there are only a handful of people, I think Hercules is the only one I can really think of in Greek mythology, who was made into a god, who was made immortal when he died. And then he married the goddess of eternal youth, I think, or something. But most, human beings here, okay, that's the difference between them and God, or them and the gods, is that they can't live forever. And this is all sad. This is the sad ending for Beowulf. And it's a sad ending for the gates too, because those warriors did not defend Beowulf. There's no recourse. There's nothing that's going to happen that's good from here on out. And that actually, we don't read the very ending of Beowulf. We only read it 2891, so I'm not going to go any further. I actually went further than I had to. This is just, again, it's a foreboding thing, and even at the end, it's just a description of what's going to happen to the world because of Beowulf's being. And a lot of this is probably part history, because this Beowulf, it's not like this is a recent thing and Beowulf just died, but Beowulf died many, many generations ago, and there are people who live now, and they're just going back through. So they know who ruled after and who ruled after that, and that there was, and the truth is, this was a very warlike time. This is not a time when people just kind of all got along and it was mostly peace. No, people mostly battled with each other a lot. And the only way you could really have any status is by being a good warrior. But then they build the bier for Beowulf, and he is burned. His body is burned. So essentially, he's cremated, and then they're going to build the barrow just as he requested from Wiglaf. Okay, and Wiglaf actually says, like, gives the speech at the burial and everything, but it's all very, very somber. And I mean, we understand why it's somber, but because, you know, this was such a great warrior, but it's also, it really is. It is, you know, without his leadership, it is going to be a hard thing for them. So anyway, that's all we had, and I'm not going to go any further. Just know that there was actually, you know, yes, they did burn their people. That's what, especially the warriors would get that kind of a fancy burial. And then we don't know of any actual, in case you wonder, we don't know of an actual like barrow or you know, funeral mound anywhere that we know was Beowulf's or something. There are a lot of funeral mounds. There are burial mounds in most parts of the world, but there were in very ancient cultures, and yet we know there are many in Europe, especially in, you know, where the Germanic tribes were common. We know that many people were buried fully, you know, like because we have skeletons and stuff like, but we know a lot of them were burned on a pyre like that. So, but we don't know of any that's, if you say, oh, so where's you know, Beowulf buried? We really don't know. So anyway, that's all we've got today, and hopefully that rounds up your Beowulf thing. But if you do have any lingering questions, make sure you write me. Just, you can send me an email anytime and let me know if there was something you were confused about. Thanks. See you guys later.